Come join Greg and Richard right here on Talking Red.
It won't be months, it'll be Wednesday.
Oh no, mate, it won't be months, it won't be weeks, it'll be Wednesday. I can't afford to waste time. This is not a project. This football club had a strong season last year. It needs to be stronger this year. My job is to get us to where I want us as quickly as possible. So, by Wednesday night we'll start seeing, some little principles being embedded. It won't take long, and I'm not going to let it take long. I'll make sure that we turn it around, because we've got an unbelievable opportunity this year to make an impact, and I'm not going to let that slip.
Ange Postecoglou took the reins for the game at Arsenal, and all eyes were on the Emirates for his first game in charge. But when you've only been in post for a few days and had just one training session with your full squad, it was probably always going to be too much to ask for anything other than what we got. The truth is, the real work can and only will kick into gear from now on. And as Ange says, he doesn't have months or weeks to get the team playing in his image. It'll be Wednesday when Forest travel to Swansea in the League Cup. Welcome back if you've been here before. And if this is your first time, hello and welcome to Talking Reds and Nottingham Forest podcast. I'm your host, Greg Oram, along with two of our USA-based Forest regulars. In Texas, it's Ross Taylor, and in Wisconsin, it's Andrew Cove. Good evening to you both. How are we doing, Andrew? You okay over there, buddy, in Wisconsin?
I'm doing very well. It's been a very busy few weeks. Good to just get back to a bit of normality. Forest playing football and losing at Arsenal, which I'm sure we'll cover in great detail. So, yeah, good to be back. Thank you. Good
to have you with us. And you too, Ross, over in Texas. Howdy, partner.
Howdy. It's all good here. Beautiful Austin day in September. Shame about the result yesterday, but everything else is all good. Thank you.
Excellent. We've got another Texan in the comments. Brucey says, good afternoon. And I think he pulled me up on my howdy partner. Is it supposed to be howdy partner or partner? It's how they say it.
He's the real person to ask, because I'm not, and Brucey will also call out the fact that I'm not a legit Texan. So he's our proper Texan. I'm just so Texan.
Bruce, I think, is possibly the most English American I've ever met. His sense of humor matches mine perfectly, Brucey. I love you dearly. And like I said many times, he's got such an English sense of humor. Because I often find when I come into contact with Americans, and you'd know better than I, that sometimes there just isn't that kind of like connection. Whereas Brucey is definitely very English in his humor. If you're with us in the comments, we'd love to hear what you guys think about yesterday and about Ange Postecoglou taking the reins at Nottingham Forest. We hope you'll hit like and subscribe, of course. So please do that to help us along. You can follow us on X and on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook as well. We're back up and running on Apple. There was a break in proceedings because we got locked out of our account, but that's now fixed. So Apple and Spotify's, hopefully you're listening along and enjoying the podcast as well. You can follow us there and you can give us a 5-star review if it takes your fancy. Okay, all right. Let's get into yesterday's game. I mean, Andrew, give us your sum up for us your thoughts on the match in general to kick us off.
It was a typical Forest away performance at Arsenal, really, wasn't it? It felt like we never really got going. I think I count over the entire 90 minutes. We had maybe 2 chances, a few kind of half moments, in the final third where we got in good positions. Final ball was lacking, and then defensively, it was a very un-Forest-like, again based on last season, a very un-Forest-like performance. That we were poor from set pieces. We kept giving the ball away. We let them have lots of men in open positions, and a team like Arsenal is always going to take advantage of that. So I think if you even ignore the context of the week that had preceded it, I think the writing was on the wall from the moment we kicked off that we were always up against a very, very good Arsenal team who, by winning that game yesterday, went top of the Premier League. This is a good team, in a fortress that they've built at that stadium. So, yeah, it was unfortunate. I don't think we ever really stood a chance even before a ball had been kicked, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Nearsighted Remembrance. That's an interesting name for a YouTube channel or YouTube account. Nearsighted Remembrance in the comments says the hopium didn't last long, and I'll agree with that. It was the most one-sided game I've seen in a while, he or she says. What about you, Ross? What did you think?
Yeah, it was interesting because last time I was on, was after the Crystal Palace game, and that was the most predictable result that actually transpired. And this was pretty much the most predictable result that transpired. And you wouldn't have known it wasn't a Cooper side, a Nuno side, or an Ange side, frankly, from what happened yesterday. So it just was. And I think we need to move on from it. Arsenal are a good team. We huffed and puffed, but we didn't really get near the house. So no chance to blow it down. And I think we just need to pull our socks up and get going in the cup midweek.
Yeah, I mean, we were trying to get our spirits up before the game, thinking that, look, sometimes the footballing gods, as I call them, come together, and it's one of those games where just something happens, where Arsenal aren't quite on it. The players, the Forest players that are, they want to impress the new manager. The new manager says something or does something or tweaks something, and all of a sudden you end up winning a game or grabbing a draw. That clearly didn't happen. So in hindsight, and as you say, it seems like this one has to go down as a free hit. That gets banded around a little bit, but we have to move on quickly. And it felt to me very, very much so that Nuno had left the building and the team's identity had left the building as well, because that just did not look like a Nottingham Forest team that we saw last year, even in these first three games. It just felt so out of sorts. And it wasn't helped, of course, with Ola Aina going injured midweek for Nigeria, out for 3 months. Big blow to Forest and the squad. So the question was the team selection. What was Ange going to do, Andrew? Was he going to really shake things up from the very off? And what was he going to do at the fullback position? We now know that he kept it unchanged from the last game, barring that one position. And so coming in at fullback, he chose to bring Morato in and switch Williams over to right back, Morato at left back. So cast your mind back to when team news came out. What were your thoughts when that happened?
We've seen this happen before, haven't we? I remember, was it 2 seasons ago or last season? It must have been 2 seasons ago. Villa away, when we had a deficit at left back, and he played Moussa Niakate at left fullback, and Villa knew exactly what to do, and they just absolutely pummeled us down that right hand side. And you blink, and it's half time, and we've shipped 2 goals, and the game's pretty much over. I think there's 2 things. You've got the new kid that came in who came off the bench later on, and he looked okay, but he's never played in the Premier League. I did look into this. Was Zach Abbott not available? Could you not have maybe thrown Zach Abbott in there and kept a little bit of extra shape in there? I don't know. You've got to just trust that the manager, and I think what he said in his post-match press conference was absolutely spot on. They'd had that little preparation time, and you had people away on international duty, that you had to kind of just keep things the same, and that continuity. That one change that he made, I can understand why you would play Morato. He's played in the Premier League before. He knows the players. He's slightly out of position, but he's a professional footballer. He's playing at the elite level of world football. He should be able to maybe have done better than he did. But for me, when I saw that team sheet, you just knew, unless we were going to play free at the back, and it was kind of a shift. And I know that initially came up that maybe we were playing a free at the back, and they were going to play some sort of wing back thing going on. If Morato was going to play left back in that team, you knew we were always going to be in trouble.
And with Madueke on the right flank for Arsenal, who had a good England camp, played well for England, it was always going to be tricky. And so, yeah, I kind of touted a 3 at the back in the preview we did with wing backs of Williams and Bakwa, and we'll come on to Bakwa in a bit, because I think he's possibly one of the nicer moments, I suppose, of the Forest performance, because on the whole, I found it tepid. I found it lukewarm at best. I found it just, a game to forget very, very quickly. What about you, Ross? I mean, could you understand Ange going with Morato? I mean, or should he really have been thinking about the amount of players that are away on international duty, they only come back on Thursday. He'd had a chance to get to know one or two of the ones in the building a bit more. So should he have maybe rolled the dice and maybe got the likes of Callum Mwendo playing from the off? I mean, Chris Wood had a long way to travel back from down under, didn't he?
Yeah, it was a strange few days for Ange, to be honest. And I think a lot of coaches would have probably said, hey, I'll start the job a week later or something like that. It was probably one of the worst fixtures to go into off the back of an international break for all the reasons you mentioned. I did expect something more of a sort of statement change or some sort of statement that kind of tied to some of the players maybe he had the most time with. To your point, a lot of those players who travelled back would have done nothing other than conditioning before this game. And my biggest concern was obviously seeing Morata at left back. It just wasn't going to work. Madueke was tearing players up on international duty, and that was destined to fail. As Brucey mentioned in the comments, I don't think we would have been damned pretty much with whoever we went with there. So I was kind of surprised there wasn't more of a statement change from him somehow. Highlight being back showed some positive signs for sure. But yeah, I think it's just one of those we just have to move on from because it just was such an irregular week. He's just not had the right opportunity to handle the team, not had much of a chance to imprint himself. And also the other part of it is some of those players really needed an opportunity to bounce back from that filthy performance against West Ham, frankly. So an unchanged team probably wasn't the worst thing because some of them had some things to respond back to. So yeah, not great.
It gives him a free pass, doesn't it, though, for Ange Postecoglou? Because you've tried the Nuno way. You gave them a free rein to pretty much do everything that made Nuno ball good. And they absolutely, they blew their lines on the day. It's kind of giving him a free pass. Until Ange ball fails, he's got carte blanche.
Yeah, I mentioned a few times in the build-up that I respected Ange for taking the job because a lot of managers would have said, look, I'm your man, but appoint me on Sunday. I don't want the Arsenal match on my record because that's just going to be too tough. But he went straight in and backed himself. And I guess his kind of get out was, well, I didn't make any changes. The team I played was the one that went out last time because that was the most sensible thing to do. These guys have been playing for the first 3 matches of the season. So I'm going with the same as, but it was it was the players that didn't perform and stand up. And we're going to get onto 1 or 2 performances in just a moment or two. I think for me, when you saw Morata so out of his depth at left back, it made me worry clearly a bit more about the fullback position going forward. We have questioned, many of us, the reason why Zinchenko was left out of the Europa squad. And we are thinking and hoping, and we're waiting for confirmation that now Aina is injured, that the new rule that we're all reading is, in fact, the case that Zinchenko can be switched in. And that will make a big difference for us there. Because if he can't be switched in, then I really worry about the Europa squad. And of course, Zinchenko couldn't play yesterday, but he can now come back in. And so it feels like the reinforcements are there for the Premier League with Nico and Zinchenko. But beyond that, if anything happens to either of them, then again, you start to worry. So we have to erase yesterday's game. We're going to talk about it a bit more, but ultimately, the real work starts now. I know that Ange will say, look, the real work starts straight away. But the Paul Taylor question in the interview that I played at the start of today's episode, where he was asked, how long will it take for you to implement your style in this team? Is it going to be weeks or months? And Ange very quickly and brashly in his usual style said, no, mate, it's going to be Wednesday when we next play. He's going to be working between now and Wednesday, Andrew, to get his ideas and his team now playing the way he wants. Was that what you wanted to hear from him? Was that what you expected to hear?
Absolutely. I think you've got to let the man be his own person. I wrote in my notes before I jumped on the podcast, I'd rather see him try and fail quickly than try and pander to an audience that still wants Nuno ball and it just go and then still not work. If Ange is going to be the right man, let's find out quickly. Let's see what happens. If nothing else, it'll be entertaining, right? And I think it being a cup game as well on Wednesday, I think that really helps and plays into his hands a lot because you can experiment. There's no burden on league. There's no burden on anything else other than just let's go out and try and get a win against a team that we probably should beat. So let's see what the players can do at very short notice, but in an Ange system. And we've certainly got the players to do that. Maybe we see a David Luiz in there. Maybe he shifts it around. Maybe backward starts. Maybe Callum Mwendo starts up front as well. You've got opportunities very, very quickly with very, very little stakes other than it being a cup game to actually, try and imprint yourself on the team. So yeah, I'm all for him. He's the Nottingham Forest manager. He should be his own man. If he was trying to be somebody else, then I'd be more and more concerned than I am if he just wants to just go and do his own thing.
Yeah, we didn't know really what to expect, I suppose, yesterday. But now we know that he's laid down the marker, Ross, that come Wednesday, you're going to see my fingerprints all over this team as much as I can in the space of, 4 or 5 days. Going back to the game yesterday, so we saw Arsenal have enjoyed down their right-hand side and Morata being exposed. What was it about Forest that you didn't like? Because for me, it was a sluggish start. We weren't kind of getting into Arsenal at all. And it was kind of a bit of a halfway house where I noticed Wood was pressing their keeper earlier. I thought, okay, well, he's got him pressing a bit. And then 1 or 2 others were pressing. But then the midfield were kind of standing off. And I thought Sangare was a little bit passive, to say the least. And the back line were doing their best to hold Arsenal at bay. And the goal felt like it was coming before it actually arrived. And Murillo was putting blocks in left, right, and centre. So what was it about Forest that you saw that was more on the negative side, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first things I noticed, and kudos to Arsenal, was just the number of bodies that got around the ball. Like a couple of times, like they would have 4 players swarm around Callum Hudson-Odoi as an out ball, and it just felt like there was times where they just had extra players on the field. I think for me yesterday, the biggest frustration was we were still in the game at 1-0, and having a cold start in the second half really obviously hurts. And I can understand Savona obviously on debut up against Eze, probably gave himself an extra half a yard. Aina probably wouldn't have needed that extra half a yard. He was just a little deep, but we just had to hang on in that first 10, 15, 20 minutes in the second half. So my frustration was that we actually had ourselves an opportunity to regroup and go again, and we really just missed it. We missed it in that first 5 minutes of the second half.
So we lost Murillo in the first half. He put that block in before. I think it was it? I can't. You know what? I'm trying to remember. I think he went off at 1-0. Did he go off at 1-0? Did he go off at 0-0? I can't even remember now. This is how bad my brain is. But he put a block or 2 in. I mean, are there any complaints about the goal? I mean, I don't think Sells could have done anything with it because it went straight down the middle, I guess. But it took that last second deflection, Andrew. So any complaints for you about the goal? And as I said before, the goal was coming. So at 1-0, when you lose Murillo, how concerned were you when you see Murillo going off?
I mean, Murillo's been in the conversation for player of the season for the last 2 seasons. You can't not lose a player like that and have it not impact the game. I think there's a reason why he's heralded in the levels that he is. I think to your point on the goal, yeah, you don't save those. I think the ball's passed Matt Sells before he's even got a chance to react, deflection or not. And I've watched it from a few angles. Whatever deflection it got, I'm still not 100% convinced it did get a deflection. I know they called it in commentary. I'm still not sure. But I think if it was a deflection, it probably was Murillo, I think, that may have got the touch.
You took a skim off someone's head.
Yeah,
I felt like without that skim, it actually might be touching on to Sells' gloves a bit. But
and
I felt that skim just took it.
I think it's the pace of the shot that scores the goal. It's not necessarily the positioning. It's past him before he's got a chance to react. My disappointment, and I watched the highlights back again this morning, I think my disappointment was the amount of set pieces and corners that we gave away in that first half and our inability to defend them. We just looked like we were going to concede a goal, almost every time. We were able to mop it up and clear our lines periodically, but it just... And I was thinking on this on my notes. We were talking about players taking accountability and the lack of individual, stand-up performances yesterday. Milenkovic was another one for me as well over the last 2 games. We've shipped 6 goals in the last 2 games. You look back to last season and we barely shipped 6 goals in 2 months. So, that's concerning as well. That, again, maybe international duty. I know he didn't play the entire 90 minutes against England, but there's still a concern that defence that we were built around last season, that's not as stable or anywhere close to being as stable as it was. So, yeah, I've got concerns. Hopefully, I mean, Ange probably isn't the one to come in and fix the defence, but, let's see if we can at least score 1 more goal than they do, right?
I guess when Murillo goes off, Ross, we see the young Italian Savona come on, and then the switch in defence with Savona going to right back, Williams then going to left back where he's been playing for God knows how long, and Morato joins Milenkovic in the heart defence. And that immediately, to me, just felt like we were a bit more solid, a bit more compact. And I felt we finished the half reasonably in good shape. And we even managed to launch our best attack with the Wood through ball to Morgan to get that shot off. And I thought, okay, we've maybe stabilised our position with Murillo going off. A big loss, but it just looked better balanced at the back. What did you think?
Well, I think for me, and I haven't done the time trials, but I think that Aina and Murillo are probably our two fastest defenders at the back, and we've just lost that pace, and that's a big deal. So although it was a positive that Morata would move inside, and I think that's more comfortable for him, I do think the fact that we just lost that total pace is the more longer-term concern. And, you know, I would actually argue that maybe Murillo could have done a job at left back against Madueke. I think he would have been as well positioned to do that versus Morato, and that would have given us another chance. Just back to Milenkovic, I think he was manhandled on pretty much every corner by Arsenal, by the way. And, you know,
but he shouldn't be. He's 6'5", and he's you know, we've been built up as the Serber now. He shouldn't be getting manhandled. He should be manhandling them, shouldn't he? Well,
I would argue that their technique on corners is probably a little bit more rugged than maybe even the rules would allow.
And why was Boy on Gabriel? That to me was a mismatch.
Yeah, there was a couple of mismatches there. So definitely room for improvement. I guess we didn't really have a chance to see if that solidification after the change of Murillo was able to take effect because we were 2-0 down so quickly off of Savona. So it was just unlucky, really, those series of events. But I am a little bit nervous about our pace at the back now. And with Ange wanting to play the high line, we just haven't got that kind of get out of jail pace that Aina or Murillo can give us.
I just felt that we closed the half out better than what we've been playing in the first part of the game. I completely agree with you. Going forwards, the back line is now a concern. But in terms of the game yesterday, I felt that we kind of recovered ourselves a little bit with Savona coming on. And I thought, okay, he settled in quite nicely. But then, of course, that was, you know, the curse of the commentator in my head, because 30 seconds into the second half, as you've alluded to, Ross, that ball gets floated over. I mean, look, Savona's a young lad coming into the Premier League. There was a moment in the first half when Morato, fullback, I mean, the ball looped in, and God knows what he was thinking when he was just coming down at him, just head it away, even if it goes out of play. But he decided to let it bounce, and that nearly launched Arsenal into a chance on goal. And in the same kind of way, Savona kind of misjudged Andrew, the flight of that ball coming over badly. Eze didn't even take one, a touch. He just took it in his stride, knocked it over, and York scores for 2-0. I worried about a heavy scoreline at that point. What about you?
It's never a good thing when you concede so early on in the half. And we talked before about like the key times to score goals, and it's before or after half time, right? You know, that can ultimately impact the course of a game. Yeah, we've seen cricket scores potentially at Arsenal before. Was it a game? Was it 2 seasons ago when they battered us? Was it 5-0 or 5-1? I think it felt like it could go that way. So I mean, credit and again, Ange called this out in his press conference. You know, the players didn't lay down arms; they did at least stay in the game. You know, it could have gone south very, very quickly, and it didn't. So having that shape, I think, helps. And to Ross's point, it was a shame that they did score so well, and we didn't see, the fruition of that actual natural back four that we were forced into. I thought Savona did okay, and to your point on that Morato, and I also noticed that as well. It was just it was up in the air, and you're not a fullback, just head the ball away. That's literally bread and butter. And when he let it bounce, and I think they built on a chance from that. So yeah. Again, I think Ange called it out perfectly that, we did stay in the game, and it was a bad third goal as well that we gave away, and it could have been worse. But to their credit, I think, like I said, that static back four actually, helped, shore us up a little bit for the rest of the game.
We've lost 3-0 at Arsenal last season, and I'm not trying to say, well, look, it's not a big deal. I don't like losing games of football. I was convincing myself that going into this match, that a defeat was probably on the cards, but if we could come away with our heads up a little bit, we're putting a decent first performance for Ange. We had things to build on, and so therefore you move on. Then I'm satisfied with that, and I'm kind of feel like we're almost there. I wish the performance had been better and we'd seen more, but we very much need to move on, as we've said several times already tonight, guys. So we are repeating ourselves. We very much need to move on. I just would have liked to see more from certain players playing in the middle of the pitch. And so I'm talking about Morgan Gibbs-White, guys, and I'm talking about Ibrahim Sangare, because I thought both of them, really, certainly in the second half, went off the boil. I mean, Brucey says he thought Sangare in the comments, he says actually had a decent first half. I'm not sure about that. I kind of feel like he wasn't as bad, I guess, but he just looked like he'd run out of gas, Ross, in the second half. Seemed less interested. I don't know if that's a fair thing to say to a professional footballer. Seems less interested, or just wasn't at it. Didn't have the desire that you need in the Premier League. And Morgan, again, just felt off it. I'm not saying, again, that he didn't have desire. It just wasn't really active and much in the game. And there's lots of people now looking at Morgan Gibbs-White. I'm not calling for him to be dropped, guys, but I don't expect him to play on Wednesday against Swansea. I'd be very surprised if that's the case, because we need to start mixing it up. Give us your take on Morgan and Sangare, and you know, is it fair criticism being aimed at them at the moment?
I mean, Sangare, I'm still pretty neutral on. I'm still underwhelmed there generally, I guess. For Morgan, I think he's just a player we have to play back into form. And again, to my previous comment about this being a weird few days, I think it's been a particularly weird few days for him too, because he's kind of been on the fringes of the England stuff. You know, he's obviously watched Elliott absolutely crush it. And then also probably the departure of Nuno would have been unsettling for him more than maybe most. So I think there's just a lot more wobbles in the room, maybe on Morgan's side of the house. But he's got the quality. I went back to watch the Brentford highlights just to remind myself of feeling good. Of just getting some of that goodness back. I hope Ange gets his arm around him and just, brings him up like he did with Maddison. Maddison played some of his best football under Ange. So I'm optimistic about what Morgan can bring forward. I just need to help. I think we need to help play him back into a little bit more confidence. But I actually feel like the missed opportunity yesterday, once we went 2 down, was for Ange to just make a couple more sort of wholesale changes 55 minutes in versus waiting a little bit longer, giving a few more minutes to some of those other players, like Bakwa and Calawendo, and maybe we'll come to Douglas Luiz. But, how could we just do a reset earlier? Once that second goal goes in, let's go and shake it up a little bit earlier on.
What is it at the moment about Douglas Luiz then, do you think, guys? Because I'm not reading too much into it. I know that people think there's some kind of conspiracy going on. The way I see it is that he didn't get any game time under Nuno because Nuno possibly was being a little bit naughty and trying to make a point and trying to make a statement. At the time, I'll be honest with you, I didn't think that. I just thought that he must be far too professional for that. But now he's gone, and now we know what we know. There's a part of me that now thinks maybe he was being a little bit naughty, and he was keeping Douglas Luiz on the bench because he wanted to stick 2 fingers up to Edu and to the hierarchy at Forest. And if that's the case, then I think that's out of order. I don't like that at all. For yesterday's game, again, we know that Ange started with the same players from the first 3 games. So that means Douglas Luiz doesn't get a start. But then you also think about, well, why wasn't he introduced? Because I thought he's going to bring him on for Sangare. And that didn't happen. So I'm kind of thinking, did he think that I don't want to bring Douglas Luiz on into this atmosphere, into this game where we're getting not a hiding, but a little bit of a hiding, and we're not in the game. He's going to get his chance. He's going to get his moment. I'm just going to keep him out the firing line for the moment. So I'm kind of in that arena at the moment. But Andrew, do you see it differently? Do you think that maybe this whole Douglas Luiz situation has got more to it?
There's one extra layer that I'll introduce, and that is that he's on a season-long loan, and that signing is triggered based on certain conditions, and some of those conditions may be appearances, right? Now, if you're 5 minutes to go and the game's gone, why would you burn an appearance on a game? You're still giving yourself options potentially, throughout the season to manage that situation. I don't think it is that black and white. That may even not be a factor that they're considering. Sangare was taken off and Yates came on, right, if I remember correctly. And it felt like it was a Yates kind of game, especially at that point in the game. So there's logic in that. I don't think there's anything ulterior in there. And I think once you get to a certain point in the game, then keep him fresh. Why risk it? I think his time will come. I think, like we've said before, I think the Swansea game and maybe the game at the weekend are perfect opportunities to introduce him after you've had, a week and a half on the training ground as well. Douglas Luiz coming in and playing in a system that he's not used to with very minimal training for everyone, not just him. Like I said, I didn't see anything ulterior in it. I think the substitutions he made at the times he made them. Maybe we could have introduced people earlier and had a bit of a swing for the fences, but I didn't have a problem with him not bringing Louise on. Like I say, I think his time will come. It's a very long season. You're managing players. We've got 5 games in the next, is it like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever it is. So yeah, I didn't see anything in it personally.
Yeah, I hope not, because he is a good player, and the Juventus year he had there didn't go well, but he's coming back into the Premier League, a league that he knows. He was extremely good for Aston Villa. So I'm kind of hoping that Andrew is kind of keeping his powder dry on some of these players. And look, I'm not going to, there's time. This is just one game, and I've just got here. So he's got all these tools at his disposal. Another player that I am thinking about, Ross, is Amari Hutchinson. He didn't get off the bench either yesterday. And having been left out of the Europa League squad, kind of felt that, like, well, look, if he's not in the Europa and he's not getting 10 minutes at the end of matches or 5 minutes, I know it's early days still, then, that's another player that we've signed for big money that is kind of kicking his heels, thinking, why have I come to Forest? I expect him to play on Wednesday. Do you think he'll play on Wednesday?
Yeah, I'd be disappointed if he didn't start on Wednesday and get at least 60, 70 minutes. I wasn't as high on his signing when he was rumoured than many others were, but at the end of the day, he's still our highest cost signing ever, and you would expect a lot to come with that. And I'd have to assume that both the player and Ange know exactly what they have there, and he must be sat there watching and hoping. So let's hope that he gets a good opportunity on Wednesday and tears it up a little bit, and we'll see what we can get out of him from there.
Yeah, because he was lively when he came on against Palace. He could have scored, I think, twice. So I was thinking, okay, all right, we've got a player here. So we want to see more of Amari Hutchinson. Going to quickly dip into the comments. Stefo Donis has put a few in. He said that he thought, or he thinks, Nuno would have selected the same team. Absolutely, probably would have done. Morato is not up to it, he goes on to say as well. Also, in the comments, James Cunningham says at least Ange took MGW off. Yep, we agree. He wasn't having another good game at all. James seems to think that MGW and Callum Hudson-Odoi look like they've down tools. I'm not quite sure I'm ready to say that just yet. People are wondering if Morgan is still distracted or has been distracted after the whole Spurs thing in the summer. It didn't look that way against Brentford on the first game of the season, when we all thought, okay, we're off and running and this team looks like it's cooking, because we did. We cooked really well on that first game of the season. And even away at Palace, that was a valuable point on the road against a Palace team that haven't lost in sort of 10 or 11 games or something like that. They've just won the FA Cup and so on. So all was good until West Ham, really, and the 3-0 defeat. I mean, I guess you could say, had we picked up the point, because it was heading towards 0-0 with 15, 20 minutes to go. Had we got the point, then you might think that fans would be a little bit happier, but you don't. You lose 3-0 at home and you go to Arsenal and lose 3-0 away. So the heat is kind of on a little bit, and we're sitting something like 15th in the division, I think, last time I checked. So Ange Ball has to kick in as soon as possible. We'll take a quick break.
The Cheese Trader, based on Grape Lane in York, is a cheese lover's paradise. Home to some wonderful specialty cheeses, relishes and chutneys, and also with a fantastic street food menu. Try their loaded fries or posh cheese on toast. It'll be the best you've ever had. Owned by Forest fan Stu Freestone, the Cheese Trader proudly sponsors Talking Reds. Quote Talking Reds every time to get 10% off your order. The Cheese Trader and Talking Reds, the perfect cheesy mix.
Stu Freestone, our good friend and our sponsor, the Cheese Trader. You can give the discount code and just quote Talking Reds for 10% off every single time in shop or online. Details are in the bio. All right, we're talking about Forest at Arsenal yesterday, and one player that did get off the bench is Dylan Bakwa. Now, he is a player that I thought could and maybe would do a job for Forest in a 5 at the back or 3 at the back with wing backs, because he has played as a right wing back for Strasbourg, and he looks like a tricky player. What did you make of him when he came on, Andrew? He looked a bit tricky, looked like a good player. You excited about Dylan Bakwa?
Absolutely. He's the sort of winger that gets people out of their seats. He's happy, he's comfortable on the ball, he's got very good technical ability, he's got a bit of pace about him, he's happy taking players on and able to break through as well and get past. I also noticed, I think, late in the second half, he's tracking back as well. I think there was a time when he had to cover, he was on the right side, so he was with Nico at that point, or was he with Savona at that point? And he was covering and he was happy to do the defensive duty as well. And that's what you want in a modern day winger / fullback / wingback. So yeah, very exciting. I think it'll be interesting to see, and let's assume that he is probably going to be in the starting 11 on Wednesday. I'm excited to see him. He reminds me of those great players that used to go and get you out of your seats. So, him being able to break past defenders and put balls in, we've got a very good, tall Antipodean striker that feeds off that sort of thing. I think that relationship could be very fruitful once they start to, get that connection built. So yeah, I think he's probably pound for pound one of the better signings that we saw from what we've seen, on the pitch. Certainly one of the better signings so far that we've seen.
He's come with a good reputation, and I like what I saw. And I got a feeling that he's going to end up being our starting right winger. And I know that there's a long way to go and lots of players to look at, but it just looks to me already like he is the direct replacement for Anthony Elanga. So it's down the left-hand side that we kind of have to look. And it was interesting that it was Hudson-Odoi that was hooked off Ross, and Endoy moved over onto the left. And we know we've got options, and I want to see Ange trying different things out, because I liked Dan Endoy playing for Switzerland on the left-hand side through the international break. He got a couple of assists. He got a goal, and his goal was him bursting into the box. I think the right back or the right wing or whoever it was had got down their flank and crossed the ball over, and Dan Endoy gate crash, 6-yard box, bang, scores a goal. That's the kind of thing I want to see. So I'm wondering about Callum Hudson-Odoi. Have you noticed anything about him that makes you worry about him? Because he's saying all the right things. This is, signing a contract. This is home. I'm not too worried. Where are you on Callum?
I mean, I think he was a little bit distant yesterday, but nothing there that's kind of more. I'm not too alarmed, put it that way. I think the positive was more Dan Endoy. He was pretty solid yesterday. I don't know if anyone plays Fantrax FPL, but he actually scored 10 points yesterday, which was pretty good for someone who didn't get a goal and assist. So, I know it because I got him in my roster. But he had a pretty good game, Dan Endoy. And there was a couple of times where he was frustrating with a couple of loose crosses, but he was active and always involved, whereby we know Callum can kind of drift a little bit, and he is more just of the outball. He's not going to track back in the same way. So we know he does that. There's games where Callum will drift out and then he'll explode and come to life and score a goal. So nothing there that was majorly alarming.
Yeah, and you know what as well? Ange Ball's going to kick in, and that's all about wingers. So these guys are going to be busy. I've got no worries about Callum. So if anybody listening or watching has got any worries about Callum, I'd be interested to hear what your thoughts are. No worries about Callum, Dan Endoy, Delane Bakwa, and Mari Hutchinson as well. There's 4 wingers here, guys, that we've been crying out for, that kind of cover and depth. Cali Muwendo, I think glimpses of him yesterday looked good, looked fine, without doing anything extremely dazzling. But I kind of did think he would start because of the distance that Chris would have been travelling. But, hey, it was what it was. So the third goal, we won't go through the third goal. It was one of those silly moments where we just gave them far too much time, and Trossard crosses it for Zubimendi just to nip in, get a header, took a little bit of a deflection off the back of Nico's header, thinking, and it goes 3-0. The game was done probably at that point, and it was definitely done at 3-0. I just hoped we wouldn't concede again, because it just looks shit on paper when it's 4 or 5-0, doesn't it? So it finishes 3-0 and off we go. So the game's done. I guess I want to kind of get your guys' thoughts on the bigger picture. And for me, the bigger picture is the fact that we go away to Swansea, we go away to Burnley in the Premier League, and we go away to Real Betis in the Europa League. So 3 different competitions, 3 different away games, followed then by a home game against Sunderland. So the bigger picture for me is what those games look like, and what do we expect out of them, and what do you want to see out of them? Andrew, I'll come to you first. For me, I'll quickly add that I want to see us going through with a convincing performance against Swansea on Wednesday night. Burnley held Liverpool for ages today. I didn't get a chance to see it until the last sort of 5 minutes. We were out shopping and I was in the car and whacked it on the phone. I managed to see the penalty, and it was a penalty, but Liverpool, of course, get the late winner. But we go to Burnley next week, and that's going to be a tough place to go if they play like that. And we are not on form. So I'm not going to be happy with the point. But if we do come away with a point, then I'd almost say, knowing what we know at the moment, that maybe that's a good point to be going away from. And then, of course, we begin our European adventure in Betis. And I'm not sure really at this point what that should or could look like. Where are you on the bigger picture? What are you wanting? What do you want to see in the next sort of 4 or 5 games or so?
I want to see Ange just trying to imprint his style on the team and go at teams. I think we've got the attacking talent to be able to score goals and to be in games. So as long as we're trying to do that, I think the future will look fine. Let's go back, was it a year and a half, 2.5 years ago, Nuno, and that whole concept of the new manager bounce. And I remember we had this tricky away fixture up at Newcastle United, and none of us went in, thinking we got even half a chance of getting anything out of that game. And then Chris Wood bangs in a hat-trick and we come away, everything rosy. And that was the start of this journey. Now, I'm not saying that, that's what's going to happen with Ange, but you never know. Football's a funny old game, and maybe Ange makes some changes, and we put in a good performance on Wednesday against Swansea, and that just gives the whole club and the players and just everyone that lift that, well, we don't want to forget the Nuno era, but this is a new era, this is a new style, this is a new ethos that we can try and instill, and maybe it'll work, and maybe we can be successful, with Ange behind the wheel as well. So I think I'm hopeful that it's the right next game. I think Swansea is a game where you can go out, you can win, you can put in a good performance, and then that everything else feeds off that. So I just, as long as we're going after teams, I think we're going to be in games. I think the defensive stuff, we've got enough talent at the back, providing Murillo's injury is not too long term or too serious. We've got talent at the back to stay in games. And I think we've got the attacking prowess and a manager behind the wheel now that's going to, give us a chance to win games, not just draw or stay in games, but to actually win games. So I'm hopeful. I think we'll learn a lot more about, what Nottingham Forest is going to be after the next maybe 2 or 3 games. And then everyone buckle up because it's going to be a ride, right?
If you are just joining us, I know there's a bit of an influx coming from Forest Fan TV. Welcome to Talking Reds. Great to have you on board. Wolfie has dropped the key. The key word is Ange's beard by the looks of things. And I was told the other night that Ange's beard is rivaling mine, and I'm growing mine a bit longer, chaps. Andrew's got a wonderful set, I have to say. But I am the man of Christmas, so I'm growing this one as much as I possibly can before I get stressed out with it too much. And yes, behind me, my wife has been out shopping, and she has purchased another tree type thing. So it does look a bit like a Treffid or some kind of alien. But yeah, I've got a new tree behind me. No room for the Gibbs White poster at the moment, guys. So welcome to the Talking Reds. If you're just nipping in, go ahead and hit like and subscribe, guys. If you haven't already, it'd be great to have you click in and tick in the boxes and all the necessaries. We are chatting Forest as much as we can. We want to hear your views as well. All right. Okay. Let's speak to Ross, because I want to hear your thoughts on the bigger picture in those next sort of 5 or 6 games or so. Where are you at? I mean, are you expecting a win on Wednesday for starters?
Yeah, I'm hoping for a win and a sort of statement performance. I think a couple of key players have got a good opportunity to get some minutes, and hopefully that'll shake up some of the folks who, are quote unquote starters. I think what would be good for Ange would be to have 17, 18 players genuinely asking for consideration in the 11. So if we can get a statement win against Swansea, I think that would really help. I have to admit, I'm a little bit nervous about the Premier League games. The Sunderland and Burnley have both shown evidence that this could be a pretty resilient year for both of them. So that makes for a completely different kind of promoted side engagement than what we've seen in the past. But yeah, we'll see. Let's get the win against Swansea. Maybe Ange will do something different with his beard for our entertainment, and we'll get the win.
Yeah, but look, you'd expect there to be changes for Wednesday, okay? So again, you might suggest, well, look, this isn't going to be the team in the Premier League. But at the same time, Ange might say, you know what, I don't have the luxury of changing it into a second 11. I didn't get a pre-season at all. I need to play my best team on Wednesday because I need them to get going into the style I want them to be playing as soon as possible. So I kind of feel like we might see the kind of full strength team that he expects or he would want to pick. I said earlier that I don't expect Gibbs White to start. So that kind of contradicts that a little bit, because he might see Gibbs White as a key player. Maybe it'll be as full strength as he wants it to be, barring one or two. But I'm interested in your thoughts on James McAtee, Andrew, because I see him as integral to this squad going forwards. I know that there are calls in other places. I think Wolfie and the boys over on Grumpy Old Reds were talking about Gibbs White, or have been suggesting that it's time to take him out the firing line and have him dropped. Where are you at with Gibbs White? I know we kind of touched on him, but are you in the let's drop him and let's kind of make him work for his place back and give McAtee a chance? Or are you kind of with Ross when he said, look, we've got to kind of play him back into form and play him back into, the kind of player we know he is? Does he need benching or not?
I think there's a bit of truth in both. I think Gibbs White's situation is very unique, and Gibbs White's position within that team is also kind of unique, that when Gibbs White fires on all cylinders, he can win you a game. Just the flick of a pass or just some of those magic moments that we kind of love him for. I'm a huge James McAtee fan. I think in 2 of the 3 games that he's played, not so much the Arsenal cameo, but the other 2 games, I think when he's come on off the bench, I think he's looked fantastic. I think there's an energy there, there's a skill, there's a talent there. And I also think him playing alongside Elliot Anderson at under 21 level is also a big deal as well, because they know each other. You've got that connection, that understanding. So I don't think we should just be dropping Morgan Gibbs White outright. I think there's a way to accommodate potentially both in an Ange system where you're playing, 9 strikers at once, not literally, but let's give it time. That might still happen. I love Morgan Gibbs White. I think when Gibbs White is playing at his absolute best, I think he's one of the best players in the Premier League. So to Ross's point, I'm fully on board with this. I think you've got to let him play himself back into form, but at the same time, this is a business. Points, are what we need. And if he's not on form, then you've got to manage that as well. So I expect we will see McAtee start on Wednesday. I think he'll play in that number 10 role. I think he'll do fantastically well as well. And also, let's not forget, McAtee can play out wide as well. So we actually have 5 wingers. So you can rotate players and accommodate both, and shift formations. What made Forest really good over the last 2 seasons is our ability to play 4 players up front and have them very dynamically move around that pitch. They weren't never necessarily locked to a single position. I think having Gibbs White, having McAtee, having, these multiple choices of wingers, I think it gives us flexibility. I think outside of Chris Wood, who is that very defined number 9, we've got lots of options, whoever we play on the pitch. So I think you've got to stick with him. I think Morgan Gibbs White is our club captain. He is our talisman. He's one of the faces of the team. And to Ross's point, you've kind of got to put your arm around him. And it's probably a very, very interesting and not difficult time, because he's still a professional. But he's going to be feeling it, and the Nuno departure probably more than most. So I think you've got to stick with him and let him play himself back in, because when you get that, you've got a match winner.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, guys. I want to also just quickly get your thoughts on Ange, because he's come into the club. But this time last week, Nuno was the boss. I went to bed on Sunday night, ready to kind of get up early on Monday morning for work, woke up to the news that Nuno Espirito Santo had been sacked. And within 13 hours, it was Ange Postecoglou through the door. And we haven't had you on this last week. Ross, where are you on the Ange appointment? Do you think it's a good thing for Forest? I know that the style contrasts against Nuno, but Forest has been starting to play a more possession-based game in those first 3 matches. Have you got high hopes for Ange? Are you pleased with Ange as the appointment? Or do you think maybe it's a bit too gruff and it's a bit too moody?
There's a lot there. I wouldn't go so far as to say I was pleased. I felt like the Nuno situation had played itself to a point where we had to do something, and kind of it was probably the right outcome in the end. Disappointed it ended that way. Of those who were available, I guess Ange was up there in consideration. I think I'm having to reframe in my mind what Ange is and what he isn't. What he was in winning the Europa Cup was actually quite tactically astute, whereby against Chelsea with 9 men, he was not. So I think it really depends on which Ange you get. In my mind, I'm still envisaging 9 players on the halfway line against Chelsea when he was Spurs manager. So I don't think we saw that on Saturday, which I guess is good. But the long and short of it is he's going to be playing some attractive, progressive front foot football. So that side of it's going to be fun. It won't be dull, put it that way. So, it's an entertainment business, and he's going to entertain us.
And what about you, Andrew? I mean, I've been on record. I was upset with some of the stuff, or some of the I don't know, some of the kind of way he conducted himself in some of his interviews. Now, I know that he was kind of picked out a little bit, but he kind of responded. He gave the media and the journalists what they wanted. And I don't want to see that at Forest. And I know that he's maybe got a style of looking down, hands in pockets, and being a bit kind of gruff, but he's very charismatic as well. I want to see the smiling, charismatic Ange, the one that makes everyone laugh. I want to see that at Forest. What about you?
I think we've been very lucky with the last two managers that we've had through the door before Ange, in the Steve Cooper and Nuno Espirito Santo were very, eventually, once they got embedded into the role, very personable, likable characters that embedded that whole community, that Forest family, aspect of what we love about our club. I don't see that happening with Ange, but if that means we win the Europa League and we finish, in the top half year after year, then I'm fine with that trade-off. I think it's going to be a big shift off the field. I think that's going to be a big thing, and that's the bit that I'm kind of probably the saddest part of me, to let go of, because I've had personal, dealings with Nuno. We've talked about that before. That's the bit I'm sad about. I think if he does it on the pitch, I don't really care. I said before we went live, managers and players come and go. The fans are the ones that stick around. As long as Nottingham Forest are doing well, I love you, Nuno. I love you, Steve Cooper, for what you did to the club. But as long as, Ange, you are taking my football club in the right direction, I don't care if you're a gruff bastard or not. Just get us in that top half. Get us winning trophies.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. We have been lucky. I mean, I know that I mentioned Steve Cooper just got into a new job over in Denmark, and good luck to him. It is Denmark, isn't it? Yeah, is it Brøndby? I think it was, wasn't it?
Yeah,
I think they won as well. So I don't care what anyone says. Steve Cooper got us into the Premier League, and he kept us in, and he has to be respected for that. He went, and we got Nuno. There were people that were grumpy about Nuno coming in, but look what happened under Nuno. Last season was transformational, and he's now moved on. And we're on to Ange. We had Harry Scarf, a Spurs fan, join us the other night to give us his view on Ange Postecoglou, and he absolutely loved him. And any other Spurs fan I've spoken to, I live in the Spurs area, they all love him. They said, look, you'll fall in love with him, and I kind of already have. I'm as fickle as they come. I was a little bit, Ange Postecoglou, thanks, but now I'm like, yes, Ange, come on, we love you, because he's our boss now. He's ours, and I want to get behind him, and I feel like he's going to take us with him. And it's going to be a different experience, but one I'm definitely here for. I just hope we don't get too much of this.
I have, on many occasions, punched blokes in the mouth, right? So I'm restraining myself today. Don't say it.
Yeah, those Aussies can be a bit fiery. Okay, right. We are nearly out of time, but I've got a bit of a quiz for you guys to finish things off. I'm going to cough. One moment. Excuse me. There we go. I muted myself. We're going to play Tenable. Here it comes. I want to know you guys, or I want you guys to tell me the last 10 different goal scorers for Forest against Arsenal. So we're looking for the last 10 in all competitions, and it does stretch back. I've given you a few clues there. So the most recent is at the bottom, going all the way back to 1995 for the one that was furthest away. So I'm going to come to Andrew first. We're looking for the last 10 different goal scorers for Forest against Arsenal in all competitions. And I have to say, like I said, I know that we have only been back in the Premier League this is our 4th season. So there's only one person who scored a goal. That's a bit of a clue for you in that time. We haven't scored many goals against them. There have been some memorable games. But Andrew, give us a name of a player who you think might feature on this list. Last 10 different goal scorers for Forest against Arsenal in all competitions.
Yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about this one. So as I live within an hour of Chicago, I'm going to go for a Chicago native, which is Eric Lehigh. Okay,
so Eric Lehigh. I think I spelled that correctly. If I don't spell it correctly, let's go. Eric Lehigh. Yes, of course. Eric was famous for the 2 goals that he scored in the FA Cup, and he got his dog and he named it Gunner, which I was a bit disappointed with. I thought, well, give it a Forest kind of related name. But yeah, Eric Lehigh is tenable. Okay, over to you, Ross.
So do I get more points for the top or the bottom of this list?
I'm not sure. I think you get a point for a correct answer. So,
okay. All right. Let's go for Jeff Thomas.
Jeff Thomas. Jeff Thomas, is he tenable? Let's have a look and see if you got him right. Indeed, yes. It was first game of the season in 1998. I was there. I was at Highbury for that match. And we went 1-0 down. I think it was Patrick Vieira. Don't hold me to that. He scored for Arsenal, and then Jeff Thomas equalised. Okay. Anyone else we can think of? Andrew, over to you.
Yeah, I'm going to go for the last goal we scored against them, which was Big T, Taiwo Awoniyi.
Taiwo Awoniyi. Now, is he tenable? Wait a minute. Let me spell it right. Otherwise, it won't show up on the tower. There we are. He's the only player in the since we've been back in the Premier League to have scored a goal against Arsenal. And it is Taiwo Awoniyi. So, yeah, you guys are doing well. 3 out of 3 so far.
Let's go for Lewis Grabban.
Lewis Grabban. So we're thinking
FA Cup.
FA Cup, Lewis Grabban. Yeah, a nice recent one, that 1-0 victory when we knocked them out. Okay, doing well. Back to you, Andrew.
Kieran Dowell.
Kieran Dowell. There's a name.
Probably should not have counted because it came off like all 3 feet that he had in the game, but pretty sure he scored a penalty.
Indeed, it was. It was a double hit penalty, wasn't it, that he scored in the same game as Eric Lehigh. So there's one in the middle of Lehigh and Kieran Dowell, which might help you or give you a bit of a clue. Maybe it won't, but I'm back to you, Ross.
My timeline's off, I think. I was going to go Collymore, but didn't we sell him in 94?
Is that your answer?
Yeah. Let's go Brian Roy.
Oh, you changed it. He's going Brian Roy. Let's have a go with Brian Roy. Brian Roy tenable? Could it be that in those EPL games back in the 90s? Brian Roy is on there. Very, very good indeed. Okay, so we've got 4 answers to get. You've got 100% record so far, you two. We are getting down to maybe the more nitty-gritty, difficult ones. Perhaps not. Andrew, what are you thinking?
I'm going to go for Ben Brereton. I think he scored the other goal in that FA Cup tie.
Ben Brereton. Well, he was literally just Ben Brereton. No Ben Brereton Diaz. Indeed, Ben Brereton is the correct answer. Okay, right. So we've got 3 players to get. I've given you clues. That all Premier League, 1 from 96 and 2 from 95. I'm back with you, Ross. What are you saying?
Yes, play percentages. Steve Stone.
Okay, Stevie Stone. Stevie Stone. He's got nowhere and we don't care. Stevie Stone, are you tenable? No, we've got our first incorrect answer. Steve Stone, great player, is not one of the last 10 different goal scorers for Forest against Arsenal. Andrew Cove.
So if I recall, Stuart Pearce's first game as caretaker manager was against Arsenal. And I had some money on Forest to tie that game. And I remember we scored a late winner in like the 89th minute to win 2-1, and I was out like £200. I think that goal was scored by Alfinger Haaland. I know that there was a game where that happened. I don't know if it was pre-95 or not. But
so Erling's dad, the original Haaland, is he tenable? He is tenable. In fact, he scored 2 goals in a game. I don't think it's the game you're referring to. It may or may not be, but I think it was a 2-2 draw, and he got both goals in that game. So there's 2 names, 2 Forest players to find now. Ross, can you hit the bullseye?
I'm going to go for one of my favourite players, Lars Bohinen.
Lars Bohinen. Can I spell Bohinen? There we go. Lars Bohinen. Right, Lars Bohinen, are you tenable? Could be because he scored some crackers for Forest. I'm afraid he's not. Andrew Cove.
I think we're down at the bottom of the barrel now, aren't we? I am going to go for... Was Woney still at Forest in 95? I'm going to go Ian Wone.
Ian Wone. So we are putting out some legends from Forest. But is Ian Wone tenable? And when you say the word legend, Wone definitely qualifies, but there is a bigger legend that might feature on this list.
In that case, Stuart Pearce.
Stuart Pearce. And this is what happens on this game. I think we're not going so well, but it says the round over is due to too many incorrect answers. So that means Andrew wins 6-3. But let's see if we can reveal the first answer. It was Kevin Campbell, the late great Kevin Campbell. And Laurie Tinks in the comments says, didn't Kev have one? You're damn right, Laurie did. And the next answer is, of course, Stuart Pearce. Okay, so we got our answers in the end. Andrew 6, Ross 3. You did rather well there, guys, to be fair. I think the more recent ones definitely were fresher in your mind, of course. Okay, if you have popped over from FFTV, once again, thank you very much for being here. And anyone who's been with us from the start of this stream, of course, you guys are legends. We hope that you will continue to stay in touch with us. We go out with preview shows and reviews whenever we can, and bring you up to date with some stats news, as well as bringing you the One With episodes, where we try and feature different Forest people, guests, fans, etc. at different times and do something a bit different on there. We do have the occasional sound effect, and we do have the occasional gong every now and again. But we're out of time tonight. That is the gong. That's the get yourselves out of here. Andrew Cove, any quick last thoughts before we go?
No, I think, like I say, Forest is nothing if it's never entertaining, right? So, it's never boring. This has proven that time and time again. So, yeah, I will support the badge, I will support the club, and I will support Ange and wish him all the success, because if he's successful, then we're successful.
Well said. Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. Ross Taylor, anything final from you, buddy?
We're only as good as our next win. It's coming midweek.
Short and sweet, but I like it. We are only as good as our next win, and we do definitely hope that it will come in midweek. It is safe to say that Ange Postecoglou was probably, as I've mentioned previously, always up against it just a little bit, and we hope that he will have a chance on the game on Wednesday night to redeem himself, for the team, I suppose, to redeem themselves. I'm going to have trouble ending this stream at the moment, guys, because my mouse doesn't want to work and it doesn't want to let me push the button where we have to end things. And there's going to be no outro music. We normally get the outro music going in. So you're going to see us kind of stood here freezing. So we are going to end the stream, guys, in a slightly different way. Come and join us again on Talking Reds next time. But in the meantime, come on, you Reds.